So I want to focus on the research infrastructure, and actually, since there's a few different groups here, but since we are talking about partnering projects and how that can evolve, and actually how we can actually together further build on the research infrastructure, I think that's going to be the main focus of the next few years, is how we set up that cooperation. So the way I go through that is basically talk a bit about the research infrastructure, but at a different level. Where are we? How do we go to that? What are our focus areas? Because this is important. How do we build this together? That's where the focus areas should be. And then also how eBRAINS can support you. So let me talk about the research infrastructure. What it is actually, I mean, physically and legally, what it is. As Jan mentioned, it's a distributed research infrastructure. So it's across Europe, built around a central hub, which is where I'm sitting, the so-called AISBL, as we call it. That legal structure might change in the next few years, but it's a hub and spoke model. And the spokes are actually across Europe, are basically organized in the different countries. We talk about national nodes. This is something you find back in many research infrastructures, national nodes. There's a reason for that, is because we are evolving from a Central European funded project, HBP, to something that has to be funded and supported by each of the national governments. And we are in Europe, but we're still a bunch of countries. So that's why we have to organize in these national nodes, and that's basically where the power will be. That's where the science will be. This is where the tools will be in the national nodes. So we are just from the central hub coordinating that. You see on the map already where we are present. So there is a color scheme for that. The green dots are, let's say, the prime members of eBRAINS. It's a membership organization at the moment, and the yellow dots are the ones that are associated members and adding to the picture today. So it's quite, actually, as a research infrastructure, as a young research infrastructure, we are quite well established already, and that's of course thanks to our history in the Human Brain project, but also thanks to the efforts that were spent over the last few years in really driving this at the European level. So Jan mentioned in his presentation that we are on the ESFRI roadmap. So just a few words of that. I mean, this is quite important for a research infrastructure. It's the stamp of approval of being a research infrastructure. It also opens up some avenues in terms of additional funding. It opens avenues at the European level. One thing that keeps me busy these days is one of those calls that's being funded from Europe, from the Commission, to actually fund and build the research infrastructure. But it also and that's much more important, it also opens up the avenue to national funding. Every country, it's implemented different in every country, but there is a notion of how to fund research infrastructure in every national entity, and that is now become available basically by being on that ESFRI roadmap. So you see, there's a few steps in there. These steps apply to budding research infrastructures, but I wouldn't say we are one of those, because actually we really start running because we have this development in the Human Brain project behind us. Sorry, there's some things opening here on the screen. I don't know why, but yeah, I can manage, I guess. Yeah, okay. So yeah, it works. And we are basically already in this, in kind of in the implementation phase. And so that then goes to operations, which is kind of the steady state of the research infrastructure. Now, steady state is a dangerous word using with research and infrastructure, because it always has to be in movement. We have to follow where technology goes. We obviously have to support science where science goes, so that there's never going to be a steady state. It's always going to be evolving. Otherwise, it's like, okay, let's stop. It doesn't make any sense anymore. If we're not evolving, then it stops. So basically, what is steady state is to have a sustainable model that can support that continuous evolution and continuous development, let's say, on top of that. So that's where we go. I need to click again here. Yeah. So just coming back to these focus areas, Jan mentioned really where the tools sit with the service categories, and this is what we have. These are the tools. Now, how do we integrate them? What are the focus areas that we want to focus on? Obviously, neuroscience. That's also been the focus. That's the focus of HBP a lot. But there is a pivot ongoing that there is going to be. Also because of the maturity of the tools that we have, a pivot towards supporting brain health. There are already a few applications coming out of HBP today that are actually bringing that research result to brain health. And why is that important? Well, we are doing research, of course, but it has to have an effect at a certain moment, not immediately. That's why we do basic science, but at a certain moment, we have to make an impact on brain health. The second reason, and that's even more important actually to most of us, is that's where the funding is going. The funding is going to come from brain health related projects. So we have to focus on that, and that's a pivot that we are doing. As Jan mentioned, we have been working in HBP and still are working on that. A lot on supporting also brain health data, and that is not a trivial task, as you might imagine, because here we are talking about patient data. Here we are talking about all the boundaries and hurdles and walls around privacy. Quite important, but you have to be able to work with that. There's of course legislation that's changing, and we're following that very closely around that as well. So that's where we go. Obviously the third one on there, the brain-inspired technologies, as already mentioned, this is something that we are taking even further. So it's neurorobotics, neuromorphic computing, but also neurotechnology in general, and that's going to be a major focus. This is a new area that's, I would say, emerging a bit, but where Europe can actually play a decent role at the world stage, and EBRAINS has to and will support that as well. So that's where we're going. Now, looking a bit back at trying to get the next slide. Looking a bit back at what we learned and what we are doing. So you could say EBRAINS has been born out of the Human Brain Project, a massive project, and that's true. We have been born out of that, but that's not, when it's grown up, that's not its life. Its life is going to be as the central point of, let's say, supporting many, many projects. Not as big as the Human Brain Project. That's probably not going to happen anymore unless something changes at the EC level. But it's going to be these Horizon calls, IHI calls, different calls that are around our area and that we as research infrastructure want to support. So it's going to be this sunflower, I like the sunflower in the summer. I need to think about a flower for the winter when I do these talks, but okay, there's some months to go. But it's this flower picture of EBRAINS. So EBRAINS is maybe a bit exaggerated in size. The projects are important. And we have to support that. So what does it mean? There's different value propositions. And when you talk about this, you always need to talk about value proposition. What's in it for me? Or what's in it for you? As a researcher, obviously, you can use the tools, and you don't even need an account, as Jan said. You don't even need an account. You can go there, you can find data, Now, whilst Jan is saying, okay, you don't need an account, I would encourage you to get an account because it helps us keeping track of what is actually happening on the platform. It helps you getting access to all of the tools, and actually we can actually work closer together. So as a researcher, the tools and the services and actually the data is really what's in it for you. And data is really a focal point for the next few years. Then if I look at research groups, consortia, well, it's different value propositions there. So research groups typically, we have to get funding, right? So project proposals, we will support you there. I have to be clear here, so that there's no misunderstandings. We are not a funding agency. We are not going to fund projects. That's not the research task. What we are going to do is enable We of course look at all the open funding calls that are available, and we build up a library of, okay, let's say use cases or something like that, that could help, like, okay, let's build a project together. Maybe we have already some proto consortia so that we can actually be a lot stronger in that. This is one thing that we as a research infrastructure want to do. But of course, if a consortium, a new consortium comes to us and says, okay, we want to work with you, absolutely. I mean, we don't have to drive this. Let's be very clear. We can be in the backseat as well. But there is a good reason to connect to the research infrastructure. It's that one of the things you want out of each of these projects is continuity. So where better to put it on the research infrastructure where science can continue to use those results. And that's like the win-win. If you work with the research infrastructure, your results will be there, others can use it and can build on it, standing on the shoulders of giants, even if they are small giants. We have to do that. That's why the research infrastructure is there. And then lastly, I mean, of course, we also want to drive science a bit. And that is for those research groups, institutions that really, and that then I talk about the membership organizations, the ones that are going to lead in the national nodes. They want to drive actually science and where it goes. That's how we build it together. This is the research infrastructure distributed organization working, and that's how they can drive actually where this goes and what needs to be supported, where the focal areas are, and that's how we build it together. So if I then look at my next slide, if that is absolutely not possible. Yeah, okay, good. Difficult. So if I then look at what we look at for future projects, so there's different ways of looking at it. You can look at it thematically, and I've just listed here a couple of things that comes out of the research strategy that's actually being formed at the moment. So don't look at that too sharply. There's other ones, but you can see already in this, the thematic focus also has this focus on brain health at a certain. It's not only fundamental research. It is also, let's say, the more application towards brain health, towards mental health, and that is also there, and we definitely want to support that. You can look at, as a project, at a service orientation. So that is more like, okay, I'm going to build kind of tools, data, to make it available for the researchers coming behind us, and that's the second orientation, let's say, we're looking at. And the last one is the technology ambition. I mean, it's a research infrastructure. Infrastructure is technology. We need to support it. It is digital. Everything is digital. So we need to look at, for instance, the digital twin technology. That's like core of our strategy, where we evolve. Let's say it's not 100%. We're not going to claim that we can simulate a whole brain, but with the combination of different simulators, with the combination of the different tools, we are getting closer to actually have this digital twin representation. And that's where also this embodiment through the neurorobotics platform, the different computing resources come in. So we are getting closer to that, and we need to continuously build on that. This is the dream, this is where we need to be, but this is also, for what I said, the health aspect, very much important. It is there today, don't misunderstand. We have tools like the virtual brain that today in epilepsy is helping surgeons in brain surgery. So it is there, and this is going to evolve. We definitely have to acknowledge that, and we have to continue to support that. So this is how we see the future projects working together with us and building actually together the research infrastructure and this vision. And if I then look at how do we cooperate on that? So us together with the research infrastructure and projects working on the research infrastructure, or working with us, or researchers actually. So what are we looking for? Actually, when there's a new science question, we don't have the answer. We don't expect us to have the tool that does 100% of the work for you as a scientist. it's not possible. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a scientist. You have to do new stuff. So we have to do new combinations of data, tools, and that's what we typically try to link into workflows. This is one of the aspects on the research infrastructure that's going to be heavily supported in the next few years, using the existing services, maybe adding some tools that could be Python scripts, by the way, building workflows so that actually your work can be used by the next researcher coming after you, and that they can build on that again. So that's one thing that we are looking for. This is how we will together build this sustainable, continuous evolving research infrastructure. And the second thing for us, again, as eBRAINS, as research infrastructure, it's important to understand what value we have. I mean, I can have these nice slides and say, this is the value to you. If that doesn't coincide with your view on it, then something's wrong. So we need to understand, we need to learn from the use of the research infrastructure, what do we need to do? Where do we need to invest? What other things do we need, actually? And the last part, and that's also quite important, I talked about data. Let's expand that a bit and talk about resources in general. This could be services, this could be code, this could be tools, but it's mostly also data, reference data sets, for instance, that are going to be there for future use as well. So, and then what do we do in terms of support? So I already talked about helping you to get funding. We are not a funding agency, repeating that again, but we can definitely help you to get to point you in the right direction, to get consortia together, to say, okay, talk to these people, map out where that can go, and that's we do on the basis of a roadmap that we will have, a roadmap of, okay, these are the things we need to do. We need to get this funded. These are partners that can go in there, and that's how we try to build that out. And then, of course, help you in designing those workflows that I talked about, and identify communities, identify other people that might be interested. So this is how the research infrastructure can help you. Next to, of course, the set of tools that's already there. And just to finish, just to show you a bit what the future looks like, this is eBRAINS participating in a few consortia that were recently granted. And you immediately see here already the focus and the pivot towards brain health. So we have a project around eBrain health. For whatever reason it is, I mean, we are in the name. But this is a research infrastructure project as well, an infrastructure project, I should say, focused around brain health in general, but also the intelligent tools and AI tools working on that. And we have an EIC project, so that is really the next level where you actually go to market. That's also running where we are working together with Paul, amongst others. That's just two examples of projects that actually basically embody this vision of projects working together with the research infrastructure and bringing it further. Next to that, there is a lot happening around brain health and personalized data, also at legislation level. That's I mentioned that before. So we are quite involved in the European health data spaces. We are part of the pilot project to build the pilot system, let's say, that will then go into a kind of procurement afterwards, but that's 2 years out. But important here is that we are there not just because we want to be part of that. We want to actually drive it. There is an important aspect here, that is that when we talk about brain data, it is a specific kind of data that's, I mean, goes beyond the electronic health data records. That's just text files, PDFs, these kind of things. Here we are talking about imaging files. Here we're talking about massive amounts of imaging files, electro, EEG, all these kind of data that needs to be analyzed and needs to be analyzed across Europe. So that's what we are pushing. This is our agenda on that. And you see our use case that we proposed there is setting the stage actually for a precision medicine approach. We haven't got any news yet on whether our use case is selected, but anyway, we will try to push that agenda in there. And of course, there's more to come. But that was just a glimpse into the future and how we will have to work together on this future of the research infrastructure, building on what has already been developed and what will be further developed in the next few years. And then hopefully a lot of you can contribute to the years coming after that. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.